it's Aaron, and the ban has been lifted. We can finally come back to YouTube again and talk about all of the things that happened to our community outside of YouTube over the last few days. Now, if you don't know, or you're watching this from the future, obviously in the last little while we had the YouTube walkout. Now, I believe it actually went really quite well in a lot of ways, and there was a lot of really interesting, really good discussion that went on while we were doing it. Some of it was good, some of it was bad, some of it was very constructive, and some of it was extremely unconstructive, but that's the way things go, and this was really the first real action that our community has tried to take part in a large collective way. And no matter what we do, no matter how we look at it, the very first time that we do something, there is always going to be problems. You are always going to stumble. You are always going to make mistakes. And luckily, we made a lot of mistakes in this first action, which is good because now we can work to learn from them. And that's really the whole point of doing anything like this, especially the very first one. It's not going to go down without a hitch. It's not going to work out perfectly. Everything isn't going to run smoothly. And to be completely honest, a lot of us aren't professional organizers. It would really work a lot better if we had more professional organizers working with us, but unfortunately a lot of us aren't. But that doesn't mean that a lot of people shouldn't be motivated by this small action to get out there and learn how to do more organizing. And in fact, I even have a few videos in this series talking about how to organize better, and you can check them out earlier in this playlist. Now, like I was saying, there's a lot of goods, a lot of bads, a lot of everything that came from this action, but I want to have the main takeaway from all of this to be that we shouldn't be using this as a point of division. I've seen a lot of people talking about how this is going to polarize everybody and how once they get back they're going to be looking at certain people in a different light, and they're really using this instance to see where people's true colors are, and some people are even talking about disowning others because of that. Now, I don't think that any of that is useful. I think that we should be looking at this as a learning experience primarily, and not as a point of division, because if we're doing it like that, if we're looking at it as a point of division, unfortunately, that means every time we do any sort of collective action, it's going to splinter our little side of the internet further and further until everything is just completely atomized, and that's not going to be helpful. Now, a lot of the benefits, I'm going to go through some of them, and I'm going to go through some of the concerns. So a lot of the benefits had to do with the idea of building community, the idea of building solidarity, and the idea of building unity within our tiny little corner of LeftTube. And we're hoping that we can expand upon this through other actions that we can go into later on in the future. But a lot of this had to do with teaching us how to be active, specifically online. That's something that isn't looked at as often as it possibly could be, because the online sphere, especially being active online, is kind of new. It's not something that a lot of people have done in the past. It's something that's been experimented with, obviously, a lot of times in other countries and during certain movements. But using this medium, using the internet and the online sphere as a point of which we can actually do certain activism is a really interesting idea, and it's something that we should be looking at more and more. Like many people have said, online space is real space. It is real life. Because they influence each other all of the time. The online sphere influences real life all of the time. So we have to be looking at online activities, online activism as being important. But that isn't to say that we don't need to be using our abilities that we learn from online activism to help us in real life activism and organizing, which is extremely important, and we should do that more. Obviously, it builds solidarity. It was easy. I mean, for a lot of us. For me, it was not so easy because I live and breathe watching the world's hellscape, which is YouTube. And I found myself extremely bored over the last few days while I didn't have it, even though I went to other video sharing platforms and that sort of thing. I went on to SoundCloud to try to listen to some music. I've realized that a whole lot of my day, of my existence, unfortunately, is spent on that platform. And that was an eye-opener for me, and it made me realize that I really need to disconnect from YouTube more often, because it's something that I believe is not healthy, to give all of my attention to this multinational corporation, this monopoly of video streaming. It's not a good idea for us to constantly be paying attention to that. And for me, it was a good way for me to understand that I have a problem watching this stupid network all of the time, and that I need to step away from that, and I need to actually work on finding entertainment elsewhere, right? And that's something that I think that all of us should be trying to do. YouTube is in this unfortunate position where they have monopolized video streaming online, just like Walmart has monopolized buying anything in real life, or Amazon has monopolized everything online as far as buying is concerned as well. And we're in this position where even if you don't really want to give your attention to YouTube, or even if you don't want anything to do with that website at all, it's kind of hard not to. If you want to do any research, a lot of places link YouTube. If you want to listen to music, a lot of places link YouTube. If you want to do basically everything, YouTube is the main place for that. And that's why I think one of the most important aspects that we can take away from this walkout is that we need to be expanding the wealth of content that we actually intake. We need to be expanding the amount of things that we actually watch and engage with from just being that single platform. And unfortunately, our individual actions aren't necessarily going to be able to do that. The only way that we can really do that is through direct action to actually destroy and dismantle YouTube and take it down entirely. I think outside of doing that, we are always going to be forced in some way to have this multinational conglomerate corporation controlling certain aspects of our life, no matter what we do. So really, we have to, yes, it was fun to do a boycott. It was important so we could learn how to do all these things. But the only way that we can get rid of these major problems is to have YouTube dismantled, broken apart, taken into pieces, along with Google, along with Amazon, along with Walmart. In fact, to get rid of the system that allows them to thrive in the first place and institute a completely different system. That's how we work towards fixing this problem. And obviously, doing any sort of action in the meantime to kind of mitigate the problems or to try to alleviate some of the symptoms is helpful. It is harm reduction, but the only way to solve it is by getting rid of these things. So anyway, I'm going off on a tangent here. Like I said, it's easy. It builds solidarity. It makes our voices heard, and if you don't think it does, obviously you're watching this video, so clearly it made our voices heard to a certain extent. And even outside of BreadTube, within a lot of other groups, they were talking about this walkout. I know that a lot of social democrats were talking about this as well. Some conservatives were talking about this as well. Actually, a lot of conservative groups at the same time as this going down just so happened to join some YouTube is over party, and they started doing a boycott of YouTube to a certain extent as well. So obviously, these kind of actions need to happen now. They do allow us to have our voices heard. And I think one of the best examples that were brought up when talking about this was the Walmart example. I think Thought Slime brought this up. Was that if you have, say, a group of workers at one of the Walmarts in whatever, Boise, Idaho, walk out and protest that Walmart, their action isn't going to be large enough to make systemic change. Of course it isn't. It couldn't be. It's only going to be 5 or 6 employees in the middle of Boise, Idaho. Maybe they might get fired. Maybe something bad might happen to them. All sorts of things could happen. But at least they are doing something. At least they are trying to make a difference. Instead of just allowing this to be bowled over on us, to make this all just fall on our fucking heads. At least somebody is out there trying to stand up and trying to make a difference and trying to say something. And hopefully other people will see those individuals in Boise, Idaho, and they'll think, hey, they're trying really hard. Maybe we should try hard with them. Maybe we should be joining in this collective action and working together and having solidarity and unity, even if it might not change anything at all. Even if all we're doing is just bringing attention to this issue, maybe we should say something. Maybe we should do something. I think that's a great idea. I think that's a great point, and I think that that is a perfect analogy for what's going on here. We might not make a major difference. Like many people have said, a lot of people might not even notice. YouTube probably didn't even care or notice at all. But that isn't the point. The point is to try to gain solidarity with people who are like-minded, who are just like you, who are looking at this multinational conglomerate corporation that is literally ruling parts of our lives, certainly the entertainment aspects of it, and thinking, no, we don't want to take this shit anymore. We want to do something about it. We want to go against this narrative, and we want to stop this from happening. Those are the ways that a lot of people feel about this. And obviously, there were some concerns, a lot of very legitimate concerns. And I think that we should listen to them all, and I think that we should internalize them, and I think that we should build off of those concerns and move forward to any other action that we decide to do with the intent in mind that we want to be better, that we want to learn, and we want to make the things that we do in our life, in these actions that we perform, matter and worth it. So some of the concerns were that it was bad for the algorithm. Yeah, it was terrible for the algorithm. It made our channels suffer substantially. I noticed that while the walkout was happening, viewership on my channel dropped off extremely heavy. It went from hundreds of views down to dozens, down to almost none. And I'm a mid-range, sort of largest channel, I guess. Not really, but I'm a bigger small channel, I guess, or a really small medium-sized channel. I don't know how you would classify my channel, but I even seen an incredibly large drop-off on my viewership immediately, which I looked at as kind of being a good thing. I wanted people to stop watching YouTube, and that's what they did. Now, I'm recording this video before I'm actually able to go back on YouTube. So I'm actually recording this on the 12th. But hopefully when I come back and I release this, I'm going to see good viewership again. But if I don't, that's something that I'm going to have to suffer with, and it's something that I'm going to have to deal with. The thing that we have to realize is every time we do any kind of collective action, anytime we try to rail against the system, it's not going to be easy, and we're not going to be able to do it comfortably. There are always going to be sacrifices that we have to make. There are always going to be things that we have to worry about. This isn't going to be a cakewalk. And if just walking out on YouTube is looked at as being some sort of thing that's going to be detrimental and irreversibly damaging, then looking at something as big as a revolution is going to be unfathomable. Okay, so bad for the algorithm. Another thing that people were saying was that it is bad timing. Now, that's a great criticism. I think that it is, to a certain extent, bad timing. It was happening right at the same time as the UK elections, and that definitely stopped a lot of our voices, a lot of leftist voices, from being able to be heard during an important time in history. And that's a big deal. That's actually something that I immediately, before I even was on board with the YouTube walkout, had problems with. When I heard about it, I thought to myself, this is a bad idea. We're too small as a group to be getting our voices, taking our voices out of the discourse. We need to have our voices there because we need to be heard, and people need to know a counter narrative, because if we're not making our voices heard, the only voices that will be heard are the Nazis. And that's a really good criticism. It's something that a lot of people have had obviously good arguments against, but it's also something that we should listen to and we should pay attention to whenever we're doing any kind of collective action. We have to think about these criticisms, and we have to actually take them seriously. bad timing. Some other people were saying that this is nothing more than a team building exercise. And this criticism is actually one of the ones that bothers me the most because, yes, it is a team building exercise, but that's not the only reason why we're doing this. Like, when it comes to, now I'm going to talk about viewership versus the actual creators that were involved. When it comes to the viewership of these channels, a lot of them are basically participating in a boycott, right? The viewers are not watching the shows, so they aren't participating in the YouTube thing, so they're basically participating in a boycott. But as far as the creators are concerned, they are very much participating in a strike. We're creators. We're the ones that are trying to produce content on this platform, and we're walking out. The idea that this is only a team building exercise is horrendous because obviously we are very angry workers in an industry who are trying to make a difference, and even doing this is still showing that we are trying to have, yes, solidarity, but we're trying to make a collective bargaining action that can make at least a little bit of difference on YouTube. Now, you can say that it's not going to be big enough to make a big enough difference. That's a legitimate concern. But to say that it's nothing more than a team building exercise doesn't look at the whole picture. It's not looking at all of the different facets that go along with this whole action. Of course, it is partly team building. Absolutely. We need to be building a team. We need to be building solidarity. We need to learn how it is, how to work together as a group, or at least as some sort of a group, so we can actually continue to do activism in real life and online. So it's all important. And finally, the last major criticism, and I've already talked about this a little bit, is that we are deplatforming ourselves. And yeah, that is obviously true. Like I said, we do have this problem where if we don't have our voices heard in the discourse, then we are, to a certain extent, eradicating ourselves from it. And that's not going to help anything at all. I have a little kitty here that's been scratching and meowing the whole time. Hello, little kitty. She's still in a cone. Yes, yes. Hello, Russell. I'm being attacked by all of my animals. So, like I was saying, there are a lot of concerns that come along with doing these sorts of actions. But as far as everything has gone, it seems as though we learned a lot. We made a lot of headway, and a lot of people got invested and got involved. And I think that's the most important part about this. And if we can move forward from this without disowning everybody in our group and without getting mad that certain people didn't partake or that certain people did partake, and we can actually build and become better, then I think that we're all going to have a much easier time the next time we try to do some sort of action. And hopefully we can actually become better organizers and better activists and so forth by doing all of these sorts of things. So with that being said, that's my show. Thank you very much for watching. If you do get a chance, check out my Patreon. Every dollar does help fund it, and have a great day.